Good morning to some of you, or good afternoon, evening for some, probably from sunny but very cold Michigan. Uh, it's a pleasure to offer this webinar on ECPE writing. I'm from the Flirking. I'm the Director of Marketing, Communications, and Stakeholder Relations with Michigan Language Assessment. And I have my colleague here, Rachel.
I'm Rachel Bassi. I'm an assessment supervisor at Michigan Language Assessment. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to have you, Rachel, and thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning for us here to share this with all the ECPE fans. We're going to be covering a few topics related to ECPE writing. We'll talk about writing at the C2 level a little bit. We'll talk about the ECPE writing tasks, the rubrics. We'll see a few samples of performance for the different types of tasks, different prompts, and a few comments on preparation tips, talking about writing. We received many of your questions and we incorporated many of those as part of to guide us in the creation of the presentation itself. So thank you so much for sending all your questions in advance. We hope that we are answering the majority of those questions. Basically, we're going to be focused on the writing section of the ECPE. We're not going to be talking about the other sections. And of course, there are many effective ways to learn a language or to prepare for an exam. So we're not trying to tell exactly the only way how things can be done. I'm sure you have, from what we saw already, the great majority of people who registered for this webinar had a lot of experience working in the ELT field and preparing students for exams, and particularly for ECPE. So you will find what you can take from here and what you can adapt in some way. We're going to share some of the questions, the responses that you sent throughout the presentation, and there is a Q&A button that if we have time, we'll be able to answer some of the additional questions. If not, we know what you're interested in learning about, and we'll post information on our website or send information to you. So let's move in with this. And this is a little about the background of the participants that we heard from the beginning. As you can see, the great majority has a lot of experience helping students to prepare for the ECPE. And it was interesting to see that the section of the ECPE that most students need more support with is writing. So it's good that we're talking about this time. So my last slide for this section. This was an interesting piece of information. You were responding on the main purposes why students are taking the ECPE, and the blue bars show teachers' responses, but we're having a separate webinar for test takers, and we also asked that question. And in green, you see test takers' responses. So to some extent, they agree with you, but it seems that teachers think this will be helpful. The main reason why they're taking ECPE is to get a job or improve employment. Majority of the test takers think that they're meeting an institutional academic or graduation requirement. Then there's a variety of different things. But it was interesting to notice the slight differences in terms of the main purposes why they're taking the ECPE. But this we'll get back to this. It's an important piece that we need to keep in mind. So Rachel.
So before we really get into the nitty-gritty of ECPE writing, there was a question in the chat, Fernando, about whether this recording will be available after. So maybe you just want to address that.
Yeah, we're recording and we'll be sharing this later on our YouTube channel. We'll have to kind of adjust the recording only, so it will take probably a week or so to get that done. And yeah, you will have access to it, no problem.
Okay, so I'm going to just start by showing you a snippet from the CEFR. So this is the descriptor of C2 level writing according to the Common European Framework of Reference, and what a C2 level writer should be able to do. So this was really our guiding principle a few years ago when we did the revisions to the ECPE writing section. And this guided us in creating the new task type with the sources, and also in looking at the scale and seeing how we could adjust the scale and revise that as well. So it's really just nice to have that in mind when thinking about ECPE. This is a C2 level test, and a C2 level writer should be able to express themselves in a variety of genres in a way that is complex, using sophisticated grammar, vocabulary, and actually find a voice in their writing. So just something to keep in mind as we move through the presentation. Okay, so first we'll take a look at the ECPE writing prompts, and then we'll look a little bit into the rating scale and how ECPE writing is scored. So starting with the prompts, as you know, there are always going to be 3 sources included with each prompt. And then test takers can choose between 2 different tasks. The first task is going to be either an article or a proposal. That's the genre that the test taker is going to be writing in. And the second task is always an essay. So if you look at the different tasks, there are usually in the article and proposal, it's based on kind of a real life situation. So it starts off with the situation. A delivery company in your city is planning to start using robots to deliver packages to homes and businesses. The next part of the prompt refers to multiple opinions on this issue. Many people are concerned about this idea. And then we have the description of what the instructions are going to be for the genre. Write an article for a local news website explaining the impact of the delivery company's decision and what you think about it. And then the instruction to include the sources. Include at least one piece of information given above to support your response. So if you think about this in terms of just different parts and instructions, it's kind of going to follow the same model. The essay, we've got a claim at the very beginning. Online shopping has made many products accessible to more people. The second part, what positive and negative effects might this have? A question, again, addressing the multiple viewpoints that might be arising from this issue. And then write an essay addressing this topic and explain your opinion about it. That's the instruction for the task. And finally, include at least one piece of information given above to support your response, so including the source. I would say definitely with your students, it's important to practice following these instructions that are given, because that's a big part of the rating for ECPE writing. So just make sure that they're addressing the multiple viewpoints of the issue, they're including their opinion, they're writing in the correct genre, they're always including a source, and integrating it well into their response. So definitely just make sure reading the task is the biggest thing to start out with. And then the sources actually connect to both of the tasks, so they can be overlapping of both. Let's take a look at the proposal on the next page. So again, similar to the article, it's starting off with kind of more of a real life situation. A local company wants to allow its employees to make decisions about their working hours and create their own schedules for coming into the office. Some people at the company think this is not a good idea. Write a proposal to the president of the company, evaluating the different options, and explain what you think should be done. So in this case, they're writing directly to a person of authority or an organization that has some kind of authority. Include at least one piece of information given above to support your response. So task 1 is always that different kind of genre, the proposal or the article. But if your students are not comfortable writing a proposal, for example, maybe they don't have as much experience, the essay is always going to be an option for ECPE writing. They always have the essay as their backup. So yeah, we gave a little bit of a clear outline of these, I think. And in terms of where to present the opinion, it can be in the introduction, it could be in the conclusion, it could be throughout. As long as the opinion's there and it's clear, then I think that's the most important part. So let's take a look now at the writing scale. You had a lot of questions about how ECPE writing is scored. So we'll just kind of take a little overview, a glance at the scale. itself. So you'll notice that there are 4 different categories in the scale. We've got task completion, development, language, and authorial voice. So let's just jump into task completion. Task completion is basically measuring how well the student completed the task. So did they address the prompt specific topic? Meaning, for example, with the robot delivery, were they talking specifically about that topic, or were they just kind of talking about the topic in general, about robots in general? So that would be referring to that prompt specific topic. Did they fulfill all the task requirements that we mentioned previously? And did they integrate or include at least one provided source in the response? That's very important. Always include the source. And practice integrating the source as well. So integrating means not just putting a quote in there and not addressing it, but actually weaving it into the arguments. That is something that a C2 level writer can do and should be able to do. Then we've got development. So development covers the support and the development of the response, and also the organization. Are the ideas clearly and logically organized? So practicing with your students about integrating examples, developing their arguments. It's not just about having a lot of ideas and expressing those different ideas. It's about having a couple ideas and developing those throughout the response. Then we have language. So that covers grammar and vocabulary. So is the test taker using complex and simple syntactic structures with a degree of control? And also the vocabulary used. Are they using some sophisticated vocabulary? Is it appropriate to the context? So using big words, but also demonstrating that they know the context for those words. That's very important in the language category. And then finally, authorial voice. That refers to the originality of the content. So are they going beyond what we're giving them in the prompt, beyond the sources, beyond the tasks, and integrating some original ideas into that argument? And also, is the response engaging to the reader? Are they using devices that are going to be engaging to the reader? Rhetorical questions, using a very specific voice, things like that. Using very highly original examples, all of those things can provide engagement to the reader. You'll notice we get this question a lot. Mechanics and spelling are not included on the ECPE writing scale. However, it is important that the spelling is not going to be a hindrance to understanding the ideas, but that's not a category on the scale. So they would not have points taken away for spelling mistakes.
There's usually a question about the under development. We have several questions. Several people asked about the number of words, whether they pass with less than 300 words, or how many words do they have to write? You've answered this several times. Do you want to repeat that?
Sure, of course. So nobody is counting the words, and the length of a response doesn't necessarily mean that it's well developed. So we see a lot of times that we have longer responses that are kind of repeating the same information over and over, or they're just not developing the ideas quite well. So instead of length, I would focus on development. So is the test taker developing 2 or 3 ideas, giving examples for each, giving support for each? That is the key to development, not necessarily the length. I've read many, many responses that are very long, but not very well developed. So the development is really what to focus on.
Great.
Okay, and the sources, we also get a lot of questions about the sources. The sources can be included anywhere in the response. The requirement is just one source needs to be used, but test takers can include all 3 or 2 of them, whichever they decide. I would practice integrating the sources into the response. So kind of weaving the sources in within the argument. Be careful about relying too much on the sources. Sometimes we see that test takers will kind of take the information that's in the sources and use that to really be the sole basis of their argument. It's important to have an argument that is developed by the test taker, and then the sources come in to support that argument. So yeah, I would definitely practice that. It's not necessary to paraphrase, although, it's a great skill to know, to learn how to paraphrase. But for example, if there's a direct quote in the sources, as many of our prompts have, that quote can be quoted directly, but it can't be the only thing there. So, giving the quote, but also explaining why it's relevant to the argument is going to be very important. But paraphrasing is also highly encouraged too.
And as you said, it's critical that the sources are used with a purpose and they're supporting a point. It's not just like something that is thrown in the middle of a paragraph, but it doesn't support any of the ideas that are mentioned in that paragraph. So it has to be well integrated in, and if they are the support of some idea that they are trying to explain.
Yes. How is it connected to the argument is the key question. All right, so now we're going to look at a few different writing samples. We have samples of essays, articles, and proposals. And we have a satisfactory example and also an unsatisfactory example. So let's take a look first at the essay. So the topic is the use of social media. The use of social media has led to a decline in the reading of books and other print materials. What impact might this have on society? Write an essay addressing this topic and give your opinion about it. Include at least one piece of information given to support your response. So Fernando's going to be my reader today. He's going to help me.
I can read this one without it. As you get an idea, you can probably in the chat, you can add whether you think this is satisfactory or unsatisfactory sample.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So nowadays, the majority of people use their phone all day surfing on the internet or using social media. Only a small amount of people still read books, magazines, or newspaper. This will cause serious problems for future and will have bad impacts on society. Reading books have a lot of advantages. According to a 2019 news article, reading helps to have a better language and using better words. Also helps not have a lot of stress and learn how to control it. Furthermore, reading develops skills for critical thinking and understand complex ideas. Additionally, reading helps to open your horizon and think more logically. So if people do not read books, will have a really bad impact for society. As a 2018 report says, in 1975, the majority of people had reading as a daily habit, but not only 16% can read books. This will have a bad impact because a lot of people are not educated enough and do not know how to talk more formal. Also, the amount of people who are unemployed will increase. In addition, because a lot of people will not have a job, they will start theft. As a result, the society will be worse than it was really a long time ago, and we're not going to be better than before as we should. In conclusion, we have to increase the amount of people who read books for a better future and leave for a while our phones so we could be more educated and smarter than we are now.
So we have a unsatisfactory. One person thinks this is an unsatisfactory response. Okay, so we can see that for task completion, the writer does address the prompt specific topic and fulfills the task requirements. They include the provided sources. However, they're not very integrated into the response, but the source is there. In terms of development, the writer includes support for claims, but they're not fully developed, but the response is well organized. We can follow it pretty well. The response demonstrates the writer's control over simple but not complex syntactic structures. Simpler vocabulary and words are used from the prompt repeatedly. And authorial voice, the content in the response is original, but the response is not particularly engaging to the reader. So all in all, this response is satisfactory. It might not be high satisfactory, high honors, but it definitely completes the tasks and gets the job done. Okay, let's look at the second essay. Nowadays, the use of social media has led to a decline in the reading of books, especially on high school students, and to other print materials. How and why has this happened to our society? According to a report in 2018, which said that pics of high school students reading books, magazines, or newspapers daily was in 1975, which was the 60% of the high school students in the whole world. This is a really increased number according to nowadays, because nowadays the percentage of high school students reading a book or a magazine is 26% of the students' population, which is a really low number. With using such source, we are not blaming the students and the teenagers of this generation. The only thing we have to blame are the social medias, because according to a recent study, the 82% of high school students use popular social media sites in every day, which is almost the whole population of the students. With such things happening, there is going to be an impact on our society, because the teenagers are always going to hold a technology device in their hands and learn online, being online and social medias with, I can't read that word, make of our society, bring and stabled. In my opinion, the students and the teenagers have to start reading books and start gaining the benefits from them, which will help our society to move and increase. A 2019 news article says that the benefit of reading are the following. First of all, reading, that's from the source, but I can't make out what the handwriting is. Reading also builds and increases our vocabulary, and the most important benefit things reading about books use is that it develops critical thinking skills. To end with, nowadays students have to stop using social medias that much and start reading books. And again, the benefits of them, which such thing will give our society a positive impact and not negative one that the social media does. So in this response, same task. So the writer partially addresses the task. They use the sources, but they are included, not really integrated into the response. They're just kind of there. They're not really showing how they're connected to the argument in this case. The development. Support is presented here, but it is not very well developed. The ideas are largely taken from the provided sources. We see this a lot, that test takers are just using the sources, integrating them as part of their argument, but really not creating their own strong arguments. The response is lacking clarity and does not have a logical progression, so it's not very well organized. You feel a little bit lost. Language. It shows control over simple structures, but not complex. Simple vocabulary is used from the sources and the prompts accurately, but repeatedly, and there's a lack of command of the more sophisticated vocabulary. And finally, authorial voice. The content of the essay is not original, it's not engaging, it relies a lot on the sources, and the writer does not include any personal, unique, or compelling examples within the response. So all in all, we would say that this response is unsatisfactory. This test taker needs to practice a little bit more with their developments, language, and creating their argument in a more organized and logical way.
And there were a couple of comments. Martine and Sophia were saying very confusing, unsatisfactory. There was a question before this one about whether they can still pass if they couldn't finish a conclusion.
Yeah, sometimes test takers run out of time and can't actually complete their conclusion, and that's not going to be penalized in any way. I would say focusing more on developing the body paragraphs is, I would say that is more important than rushing through that and getting to the conclusion. So while it's nice to have a conclusion, it's not going to be penalized if it's not there, if they didn't have time. Okay, so here we have the article task. The local city council wants to close several downtown streets to personal automobile traffic in order to make the downtown area more pedestrian friendly. Many shop owners are concerned about this idea. Write an opinion article for the community website addressing the various viewpoints on the issue and your opinion about it. Include at least one piece of information given above to support your response.
So this has a title, a pedestrian-friendly area. Nowadays, modern life has necessitated the extensive use of means of transportation, enabling citizens to move around freely on foot. A new law comes to alter this situation by closing several downtown streets to promote a pedestrian-friendly area. What impact does this initiative have on the city? What about the shop owners? First of all, no one can dispute the fact that air pollution is a primary problem that our planet is currently facing. The exhaust fumes emitted by automobiles, motorbikes, and trucks increase air pollution at an alarming rate, thus transforming the city into an actual greenhouse. A board plan like this will substantially reduce the exhaust fumes emissions, making the city an eco-friendly destination. Another point to consider is the positive effect that this plan would have on residents' life. When excessive workload, stress, pressure, as well as daily obligations get in the way, people may face psychological problems like depression. A walk in the downtown, not bustling streets of the city will give them the chance to relax and escape from everyday routine. Despite these advantages, we ought to consider what impact this plan may have on the shop owners of downtown streets. Most of them depend on the takings of their shop to make their own living and provide their children with the basics. Private automobiles encourage traffic congestions, especially downtown streets, so more clients are expected to visit the shops. In my opinion, this is an excellent initiative that can reduce the devastating effects of traffic in cities. It can also encourage citizens to start adopting a more friendly attitude towards environment. In conclusion, the urbanization has resulted in numerous consequential effects, such as air pollution, that put our planet in jeopardy. A law like this, suggested by the City Council, would not only reduce the ecological footprint on the city, but also provide the residents with more autonomy and flexibility, and to a decrease in profits can be devastating. That was a note from
before. Yeah. Okay, so that's very timely because we just talked about the conclusion. In this case, the test takers aren't able to finish their conclusion, but that's okay because the arguments that they had contain the development needed. Okay, so for task completion, the response addresses the prompt-specific task and fulfills the task requirements. There's extensive development of ideas, and there's a clear and logical organization of ideas for this example, and also effective use of transitions and referencing, so that enhances the organization of the article. In terms of language, the writer has command over simple and some complex grammar, and there is some use of more sophisticated vocabulary in this response. In general, this is an engaging response, and it has original content, so the authorial voice is covered there. And all in all, this is a satisfactory response.
I like the question that he introduced at the beginning and kind of answered it later on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so ECCE writing, this is the article. The scan is a little bit light on this one, and so Fernando will just read from the text on the side.
Yeah, you can see what was written, but I had to type it so that we could easily understand what they were saying. So, make our city healthier. According to a recent decision of our local city council to close several downtown streets to personal automobile traffic in order to make the downtown area more pedestrian friendly, I want to mention the positive results as also the negative results and last my opinion about the topic. On the one hand, we have the people who agree with this opinion because this action would be beneficial for our environment, which is in a very difficult condition the last few years. Also, as a 2019 UK study showed, the gasoline cars are the most harmful emission of transportation. In addition, this decision will make more people go for walking, as they will not have another option if they want to cross these downtown streets. On the other hand, we have the people who believe that this decision will be a problem for them, as many people who walk on those streets are as employees. They will have less income. To be more specific, many people who buy products from their stores will not visit them due to lack of access. Finally, in my opinion, I think that this decision would be very beneficial for our area, as we would have a non-polluted environment, which would help us to be healthier and happier.
So this is a good time to talk about spelling. So there are some spelling mistakes in this response and some punctuation errors. However, that is not really going to impact the score of this response. So let's focus instead on the things that would impact the score according to the rubric. So for task completion, the response does include a discussion of the topic. The writer includes but does not integrate 2 of the provided sources. In terms of the development, the writer organizes the essay logically and uses cohesive devices, but the ideas are not well supported or developed. The writer's opinion is provided, but it is not a logical conclusion from the arguments in the previous paragraphs. And then in terms of language, the writer demonstrates some control of simple grammatical structures, but most complex structures have errors, so there isn't that control there. Sophisticated vocabulary that is appropriate for the prompt is used accurately, but some attempts at more complex vocabulary are confusing. So sometimes we see that test takers will attempt the complex vocabulary, but they're not really attempting it in terms of using it in the appropriate context. So that creates some confusion for the reader. And authorial voice, the writer rarely includes details or ideas beyond what was given in the prompt and the source material. And there are not any attempts made to engage the reader in this particular response. So all in all, this response would be unsatisfactory. Now we have the proposal. So for this proposal, a local high school is planning to require all students to take a physical education class for 1 hour every day. Some students and parents are excited about this idea, but others are not. Write a proposal to the principal of the school evaluating the different sides of this issue and explain what you think should be done. Include at least one piece of information given above to support your response.
So exercise at school. The last few decades have witnessed an increasing advancement in technology, which has affected every aspect in our everyday lives. This development has provided children with many things to do in their leisure time, which has resulted in them living a sedentary life and not getting enough exercise. Local high schools plan to require students to take physical education class for 1 hour on a daily basis, has raised a fair amount of controversy. People in favor of that happening understand the benefits of physical exercise, which are in fact plenty. First and foremost, while you're exercising, your brain emits specific hormones which help make you happier and more relaxed. Who would not want that after a stressful day? With reference to a recent study, the top 3 benefits of exercise are better sleep, stress relief, and improvement in mood. Additionally, one must bear in mind that exercise has many forms, including team sports such as football and volleyball. The excitement of some students and parents is reasonable, considering children will not only have fun while concurrently exercising, but also develop a number of fundamental virtues. Specifically, some of these virtues are solidarity, teamwork, discipline, and understanding. Another factor supporting this idea is the fact that exercise in conjunction with healthy eating habits are necessary for a complete healthy lifestyle. Unfortunately, it is true that children nowadays have the tendency to prefer junk food over a proper home-cooked meal. These bad habits lead to obesity. According to Marcia Robbins, physician, we're seeing more general health problems and obesity than ever on a worldwide scale. The other end of the spectrum, there are those who disagree with the high school plan. It is true that some children are not fond of exercise. Maybe it's not their ideal hobby. In some cases, children feel inhibited to work out in front of their classmates. Furthermore, it is possible that they are getting enough exercise from extracurricular activities and do not need it to exercise to school. In this case, a recess could be better, maybe an extra hour to do their homework. In any case, this extra daily hour could be filled with a music, theater, or arts class, something that all children are comfortable with. To sum up, it is my firm conviction that both sides have merit. In my opinion, the best solution is balance. Physical education hour should be optional. Children who opt out of this class should be offered a different class conducive to the preferences of the majority of them. That way, everybody's happy.
All right, so let's take a look at the commentary for this response. So this was a satisfactory response. The writer clearly addresses the topic, discussing different viewpoints and proposing a solution. And he integrates 2 of the 3 sources within the response very well. These sources, this is a good example of the integration of sources that was successful. Development, the ideas in the response are extensively developed and supported and logically organized. There's effective use of paragraphs, each elaborating on a central idea. In terms of language, there's a high level of control of grammatical structures and vocabulary. There's a lot of sophisticated vocabulary being used in the response, and it's all being used as appropriate to the context. And authorial voice, this is an original response in terms of the examples being used and also engaging for the reader. So this is definitely an example of a satisfactory response.
There's a question about whether it's important to mention clearly in the introduction that there are opposite views.
I think that it could be mentioned in the introduction, but the most important thing is just to include those opposite views and reference them within the body paragraphs.
And that was clearly done in this case.
Okay, so this next response is also a proposal. A local company wants to allow its employees to make decisions about their working hours and create their own schedules for coming into the office. Some people at the company think this is not a good idea. Write a proposal to the president of the company, evaluating the different options, and explain what you think should be done. Include at least 1 piece of information given above to support your response. So this one is a little bit difficult to read, but I'll try my best. Mr. President, this proposal is about a very important issue that has come up frequently. This is the decision of our company that permits and its employees to create their own schedules by choosing their own working hours. This fact has provided many different opinions, so I decided to write to you about this and discuss about a possible option that could be applied. On the one hand, there are many employees who disagree with the prospect of creating their programs for coming into the office, as they believe that about this must follow one schedule, because in this way our company will help to be proactive as now and will be safer from any disastrous distractions, something that would be possible if the employees are not able to face a new situation. On the other, another reason for this disagreement is the investing decision, what working hours, is that there is a fear about which of these productive hours of the day. For example, if someone chose to work late at night, we can't be sure about the effectiveness of his or her work. On the other hand, a big part of the company's employees feel that this option really interesting. This is because be able to be more flexible and be free from any obstacle in their personal life that could distract them from their duty. For instance, a businesswoman who is also a mother, if she has the right to create her own schedule, she would be able to make everything more effectively. In addition, every member of the staff will be more energetic, and it might be able to create a program about its needs. To sum up, in my opinion, the decisions of our company is something helpful, really helpful.
Likely.
Yeah. All right. So this response would be an example of an unsatisfactory proposal. While the response is on topic, it does not fulfill the task requirements. The writer does not give a clear indication of what he thinks should be done or include any information from the provided sources. The ideas are not all fully developed. There are some ideas in there, they're just not supported adequately. And the response is organized, however. In terms of language, the writer demonstrates control of simple structures, but not complex. There are many frequent errors that distract the reader, and vocabulary is typically simple and at times repetitive. For authorial voice, the writer does not use any strategies to try to engage the reader in the response. many of the ideas in the response are quite broad or general and lack originality. So that is the example for a proposal.
There was a comment about, I think that this very specific conclusion was way too short. Is this okay?
Again, I think that the focus on the conclusion, I think it's really nice to have a conclusion, but the more important thing would be the body paragraphs and how those are developed. The majority of the development is going to be happening in the body paragraphs. So even if there's just a 1 or 2 line conclusion, that is a nice thing to have, but it's not really going to enhance the development of the response. So it would be okay to have just a shorter conclusion, especially if the writer's running out of time.
Right, that was probably the case, yes.
Yeah.
Kind of rushed. Okay. There were a couple of questions about the style of the proposal, if it has to follow a certain format in some way. Like a proposal or an article sometimes is written more as an essay in terms of the structure organization. Is that fine?
We've seen that. Yeah, we've seen that. And I think that people were talking about the first example of the proposal. It is doing what it's intended to be doing. It's not really clearly addressing the person of authority, but if it is addressing the topic and being specific, I think it's okay. Sometimes, it can still be a satisfactory response. But yeah, it definitely does have an effect on the reader if it's not addressing that person.
And we're going to share the recording of a session, so you will have access to the slides later then. So in terms of preparation, something was interesting was to ask test takers how, for the ones that register, probably all your students, if you're here, I guess you invited them to join the other session for students. And we've enjoyed doing that for students for ECCE last weekend, and we're going to be meeting ECPE students this time. But one of the questions that we asked them was how they practice English outside the classroom. You can tell us whether you think they're telling the truth or not. But the great majority said that they were doing a lot of things outside of the classroom, how they were practicing English, not necessarily working on their exam in particular, but obviously developing English skills and improving their language will help them do better when they're taking any exam. So these were the percentage of students that said how they were practicing English outside of a classroom. And by far, the majority either watch movies or videos, YouTube, watch TV, series, things that they like in general, with or without subtitles. They mentioned several things. It was interesting to see how many of them read. They are interested in reading in English. Of course, listening to music, but I want to highlight the fact that they are a higher percentage. At least they said that they are reading. More people are reading than listening to music overall in this case, which is encouraging to some extent. Talking with other people, talking with friends, relatives, native speakers, people that they know. So that's something that would be great to encourage, obviously. And then you see a variety of other things, even traveling, talking with tourists, chatting, playing video games, interacting with other people online, listening to podcasts, online talks. So just a little percent, well, very few people at the very end said that they didn't practice anything at all. So keep encouraging them to do something else that they like, because this will definitely help them to prepare. But here are some of the questions that you asked. We're not going to cover how to work on writing skills overall, but we'll talk about a few of these ideas and what can be more directly related to what they're doing with in preparation for the ECPE. Rachel already addressed some of these things and helping them, like improving authorial voice, the comments she made about the different samples that we shared already will help you with the skills that they might need to do to improve in order to do better on the exam. You can tell what is the best answer to complete this sentence. What is the best way to improve writing? What do you think? You can write it in the chat. It should be pretty straightforward.
Practicing.
Practice, writing.
Right.
Practice. Yes, exactly. Reading definitely helps as well. Great. But obviously the best way to improve a skill will be by practicing that same skill. Definitely encourage them to write as much as they can on different types, different sources, different genre, the different types of tasks that we have, but we can find different ways how they can be more engaged writing about topics that they like, something that they might be interested in, something they might explore. So it doesn't always have to be only about what's happening in the exam in itself. Obviously, they will need to practice within a timed framework to be effective, to be successful during the day of a test. But we have a few resources on our website that you can use in class that students can have access to by themselves, that you can encourage them to visit directly, becoming familiar with the instructions, reading about some of our samples that we have online, and there are different packages that we have prepared with commentaries as well. Looking at those will help them. Of course, encourage them to practice all the different sections that Rachel was explaining, working on their thesis statement and outlining a series of ideas to support those, and exchange ideas with other peers and seeing, well, this is not really supporting that main idea. What could be a better supporting detail for this main statement that you're trying to explain? And getting feedback like that will help them with their writing, with supporting main ideas and elaborating and supporting with the right kind of detail. Practice timed and untimed writing, integrating sources, as Rachel was explaining, and making sure that how they're using that quote or that source will support the main idea that they're trying to explain. It's not something that is just added artificially without contributing to the main the explanation that they're trying to elaborate on. Try to help them write realistic arguments that are in favor of an argument or against an argument, so that they can practice seeing things from different perspectives, and they can elaborate on both sides of a single issue more comfortable when they're taking the exam. And working on ways to engage the reader as an author, and when they're writing to them, and practicing them when they're doing the writing for the exam itself. Reading academic articles will help them elaborating on topics of interest. Any implications, Rachel, from the rubric and how teachers can help students keep developing certain skills that are can be inferred from the rubrics here? Do you want to talk about this one?
Sure, absolutely. So I think just, the one thing that I would ask you to take away from this is development, and just helping your students support the development of their responses, taking some ideas and, developing them logically and clearly, using examples, using personal examples or examples just from what's happening in society. That's all going to help contribute to their development. And it also will help create with their authorial voice, because it makes the response more engaging to the reader when there are examples and tangible examples that you can point to. Also using sophisticated vocabulary, but making sure that they know the context of it. So not just memorizing words and their meaning, but actually practicing integrating the meaning or the words into the writing. And, we said that writing is practice, practice, practice. So that's a big part of it. Even just having a few different sophisticated vocabulary words and having them practice integrating those into the writing would be helpful.
Choosing several questions were related about to how you can, as teachers, find the right topics to help them be prepared. So you probably saw the patterns behind all the different prompts that we have. You have to choose topics that lend themselves to have, like, to developing multiple viewpoints on a certain issue. That's where we have the essays, the proposals, and the articles with considering different points of view. That's what they have to do in kind of real life when they're writing an article and understanding it's not just their own point of view, but they're considering different things to come up with a conclusion at the end based on all the evidence that they've presented. You can look for different kind of current events, current news that students might be interested in to some extent, or you can explore different things to discuss them with students. We'll see an example in a minute, but especially to see how they can find some information to use as possible sources to include in their arguments as well. And we'll look at a couple of examples here, but choosing topics that could work well for both essays and articles or proposals. We'll see a couple of examples now, but thinking about the audience that would have some kind of interest in that topic and what kind of topic might be relatable to students. For example, some ideas that you can think about in terms of choosing topics for practice with your own students. Think about policies that schools or city councils or governments might be implementing in your region, your area, country, or in the world. Everything in our global world at this point, we know about what's going on in many parts of the world, and they will have opinions about everything that is happening there. What kind of issues are affecting specific groups like workers or students or the elderly or some particular stakeholder that they might be interested in, that they want to defend or want to support in some way? Or are there topics that might be more of a local or global interest, like public areas or city budget, or how their citizens' money is being spent, or what is affecting the environment, or how technology is impacting our lives? These are some possibilities for you to think of. I was looking for different options, and I found these 3 different articles online around the same dates, like from the last couple of months or so. One from the New York Times, why countries are trying to ban TikTok. Another one from the Salt Lake Tribune, our kids cannot handle this, the social media need government regulation. And another one from CNBC, more social media regulation is coming in 2023, members of Congress say. Just bringing these 3 ideas and brainstorming with students, what do you think? What could be a possible topic? You can write it on the chat that you could elicit with students or propose to students based on these 3 articles. Can you write some suggestions in the chat and see how you would use these ones? And this is not a topic that will appear in any of the ECPE's prompts soon. It was just something out of a blue from news that we found now. One suggestion, the use of TikTok. Yeah. Any other suggestions? Do you think this might be a topic that your test takers might have an interest in, and might have an opinion about? There's some people writing. The impact of social media, effects of social media on students. Yeah. How ethical is it to attempt to regulate social media? Right, there are many angles that we could take from here. Suppose you can propose some governments are introducing legislation to regulate social media. They might write an article about this, an opinion article too, and you can elaborate how you want them to discuss this, or they can write an essay about the positive and negative effects that this might have. A proposal to whoever you think might be important in this case to address. So it's just looking for possible ideas from real news, recent news in this case, that could be applied to practice activities. And some suggestions about developing content. Now, there were several questions related to this, how to encourage students to develop ideas to write their essays. But again, encourage them to think about different points of view, brainstorming, working individually, working with peers or in teams to brainstorm ideas, how they can develop a particular topic. Rachel was insisting on the importance of a well-developed written piece. Trying to include original content, not just using the language from the prompt or what they see there as in elaborating on those ideas only. It's really important that they bring their own ideas into the writing and supporting them clearly, logically. When they mention a main idea, they have to include a few details to support that, to elaborate a little bit on each of them, not just leave those in isolation. And mentioning specific examples, something that is close to them, probably something that that relates to them in some way. Those will be the most effective type of information that they're going to provide in order to support their writing. Connecting those ideas, the sources, to the main idea, using the sources to strengthen their arguments, explaining how they are connected to the main thesis statement, and finding connections between the prompt and topic and their own personal experiences or knowledge.
And then in terms of language and authorial voice, as we said before, just encouraging students to take risks with their grammatical structures, focusing on more complex mastery of grammatical structures and how to use those accurately, and including a wide range of vocabulary, again, that is being used appropriate to the context. Thinking about how to, and in terms of authorial voice, thinking about how to present their argument to the audience that they're writing for, and strategies for engaging with that audience. A lot of you were saying, and this is a great and helpful thing to do, looking up examples, even just examples of opinion articles or examples online that they could find. Just thinking about, why is this engaging? Why is, what can I do in my writing to make it more engaging? I think that there are different techniques that can be applied within the classroom, and they can see that in everyday writing as well. Avoiding ending paragraphs or the essay with unexplained or unanalyzed quotes. It's important. Making sure that they know the meaning of transition words or phrases, so that they're not just using them, kind of plugging them in, but that they're actually being used in an effective way to transition from one idea to the next. And using appropriate language and register for the audience that they're addressing. So in the case of ECPE, it's a more formal register. Somebody actually asked about using personal examples. So I think that one way to differentiate using personal examples from ECPE writing versus, versus personal narrative style writing is thinking about the audience and thinking about, they're kind of playing the role as a community member. So, including ideas and examples from what's going on locally in their area could be a way to include personal ideas that kind of separates it from just their own personal narrative and experience.
So wrapping up, we covered a lot of information about C2 level writing, the tasks, using sources, samples of performance of essays, articles, proposals, some tips to help students prepare for ECPE, and thinking about different resources, choosing the right topics, content development, looking at language and authorial voice. I think it's really important about their main goals and helping them remember, like tying what they're doing when they're practicing and developing the skills. For an example like this one, what will this really be helpful with for what is this contributing to their own lives and their personal goals, and how is ECPE going to help them accomplish something important in their lives, and helping them keep that in mind will be something important to motivate them and to engage them to meet those personal goals. So we're always trying to motivate them in some way and keeping how they are planning to use their English skills and the more high level cognitive skills that they're developing with their language at the same time is important to help them remember that those main goals that they have in mind when they're looking at their future and their expectations in some way. So with that, hope that you continue to connect with us through our social media and different platforms that we have. We will be posting out the video on YouTube for this presentation soon. So thank you very much for participating in the session. It was very good to interact with you to some extent through the chat. Thank you for all your questions and your comments, and all the best. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.